Hello, my name is Barb, and I am a clusterhead. That means that I suffer from terrible head pain called cluster headaches. I would like to share the information that I have learned about cluster headaches with you. I can help you learn who is most likely to be affected by cluster headaches. I will reveal some traits unique to cluster headaches. I will point out the symptoms of a cluster headache. I will explain the difference between episodic and chronic sufferers, and I will touch base on some different types of treatment. I'll start with who is most likely to suffer cluster headaches. If you have never heard of a cluster headache, that's okay. They are a very rare form of headache. Less than 1% of the world population suffers from cluster headaches. Approximately 80% of sufferers are men. Cluster headaches usually don't make an appearance to a person's life until between the ages of 20 and 40. With only a few people suffering from cluster headaches, they are hard to diagnose. However, cluster headaches have some unique traits. Cluster headaches have their name because they usually occur in groups or clusters. A person suffering cluster headaches will have repeated attacks throughout the day, usually around the same time. Cluster headaches can wake a person out of a deep sleep, which has given them the name alarm clock headaches. While the cause of cluster headaches is still unknown, Dr. Peter Goadsby started the theory that an abnormality in the hypothalamus, which controls a person's internal clock, among other things, could be the cause. Now that you know a little bit about what a cluster headache is, I will describe the symptoms that define a cluster headache. Cluster headaches usually don't give the sufferer any warning before they attack. They just hit like a bolt of lightning. I spend a lot of time clock watching when I'm in an episode because they are very regular. A cluster headache always occurs on one side of the head. It does not switch sides like migraines sometimes do. My clusters are always on my right side. Pupil contraction and facial drooping have been observed in some patients during a cluster headache. Cluster headaches cause immense pain. The pain involved with a cluster headache has earned them the name suicide headaches. It is very difficult to describe the pain. Try to imagine the worst pain you have ever felt. Multiply that pain by 1,000. Finally, imagine feeling that pain for an hour or more, 8 to 10 times a day, every day, for the rest of your life. Wow, that hurts. I'm glad the hard part is over. Let's move on. Earlier I mentioned two types of cluster heads. There are episodic sufferers and chronic sufferers. Episodic sufferers experience attacks repeatedly on a daily basis for several weeks or months at a time. And then they have a remission period, which I call time off. Time off can be several weeks or even years with no cluster headaches. Most cluster heads are episodic sufferers. My episodes last for 4 months every 4 years. Chronic sufferers, on the other hand, experience a barrage of attacks every day of every week forever. If they are lucky, a chronic sufferer may go into remission for a couple of days. These remissions may happen only once every couple of years. I have told you a little bit about what cluster headaches are and some of the symptoms associated with cluster headaches. You are probably wondering if there is any cure to stop these horrible headaches. Unfortunately, there is no cure for cluster headaches at this time. The cluster headache comes on so quickly that most abortive medicines, like those used for migraines, are too slow to stop the cluster headache. Some abortive medicines are available in an intravenous or inhalant form. These versions of medicine must be administered in a certain way to be effective. usually by or under the supervision of a doctor or nurse for the first couple of times. Oxygen therapy is a relatively new method of stopping the cluster headache attack. However, this method is impractical for most people. It is very awkward to carry around an oxygen tank, and most clinics won't let you sleep next to theirs. There has been some success using preventive medicine to decrease the frequency of the cluster headache. The sufferer will still experience the cluster headache attacks, but hopefully not as many. Here's a quick review of the information I have shared about cluster headaches. Only a handful of people are most likely to be affected by cluster headaches. Cluster headaches have some unique traits and symptoms to look for. There are episodic and chronic sufferers. While there is still no cure for cluster headaches, there are some treatments that can help ease the pain and frequency of attacks. I have shared this information with you because cluster headaches are terrifying. When I first started experiencing cluster headaches, I was in my late 20s. I had no idea what was happening to me, and my doctors didn't either. It was a very lonely and frustrating time because nobody could relate to what I was going through. I got lucky because my doctor was very curious and started researching when all of my tests came back normal and she couldn't find anything wrong. I insisted that something was going on, and I'm very glad that she listened to me. I sincerely hope that none of you or your loved ones ever experience this kind of headache. If you do, remember that even though it is very painful and terrifying, you can get through it and you are not alone. Thank you.